Welcome. My name is David F. Wilson, and you're listening to Dust, David's Ultimate Stone Talk, a podcast that aims to explore all aspects of the stone trade, from its ancient origins to its contemporary use as a medium of cultural and creative expression. It's my absolute pleasure today to welcome onto Dust two of the nicest people it's been my privilege to meet, Johnson and John Engelland. Combining their forces, they produce work together under the art title of Rising Star, which is exactly how I see them, two rising stars of the stone world, producing exceptional creative projects. I predict they have a bright, exciting future ahead. I can't wait to see what they design and build in the coming years. Their approach is unique. They bring to the craft a spirituality and humanity that speaks to the best of what is inside all of us, if we would only take the time to listen and appreciate. Spreading stone love and positivity is a key component of their message and practice. They express that daily through their intimate relationship with the earth and their own processes, sharing their thoughts with the wider world through thoughtful posts on social media about the glory and beauty in simple things. One-time chairman of the Stone Foundation, Zach now concentrates on the day job. With a love for 60s and 70s funk, he also DJs a spot at a Boulder-based radio station on the Dusty Groove Show. He's also the guy to have sitting opposite you in a mountaintop restaurant in Colorado when, rather embarrassingly, your credit card gets declined. If you listen to my last mini podcast, John is the tall, lanky guy who so bravely and honestly spoke about his relationship with stone in front of his peers at the Stone Foundation's Cottonwood Falls, Kansas Symposium in 2017. It was a talk that changed my whole attitude to the material and craft. He opened my eyes to the why. He made me appreciate the reasons it is so important to us all. And not only is he a passionate advocate for the craft, he's also quite the sportsman. At that same symposium, he was crowned a wheelbarrow steeplechase world champion, a real achievement. Sadly, the Scottish entrant made a rather error-strewn performance and didn't quite make the winner's podium. There have been many famous duos throughout history: Adam and Eve, Antony and Cleopatra, Laurel and Hardy, Simon and Garfunkel. We're all aware of the dynamic tensions that can arise when two separate personalities act as one. I'm looking forward to hearing if working with stone together is harmonious, or if even these two chilled personalities sometimes want to take a hammer and chisel to one another. Hi there, Zach and John.
Hey there, David.
How you doing?
Good. Glad to be here.
Good. It's great to have you. It really is great to speak to you today.
Thanks for the lovely intro.
It's kind of a fun part of the process, pulling that up. So, just for the listener, it's quite a good idea to kind of paint for them a sort of a broad brush picture of where you are in the world.
So John and I live on the Front Range of Colorado, which is like the eastern third of Colorado is plains, prairie, tall grasses. And then the western 2/3 of Colorado is where the Rocky Mountains start. And so we're kind of at the edge of that. We're close to Denver and Boulder. I live in Lyons, which is a small town north of Boulder, about a half an hour. And it's really, really beautiful up here because we have I don't know how many dozens of sandstone quarries that we build with almost all the time. And it's really good to be at the heart of that. Yeah,
I'm just about maybe 10 miles southeast of Boulder, not even. So yeah, we're right there in the same region. Zach's a little more in the mountains there. I think he has a little bit of a nicer location. I'm more in the suburbs, if you will, but it's still beautiful. Yes.
I must admit, when I met up with you both on my Winston Churchill travels, Colorado, Jane and I just both loved it. We thought it was the most beautiful part of the country, and that trip down from, after meeting up with you, moving down through the mountains towards Flagstaff, it was just stunning.
It's a beautiful drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very busy traffic wise, though. We were very, obviously, everybody kind of escapes out into the country at the weekends.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's become we're being invaded. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are moving around in the States. It's been quite a journey the last 4 years.
And, yeah, a lot of them coming here.
And maybe just outline quickly, for the listener, what your connection to the stone trade is.
My introduction to stone began the summer of 2002. I got laid off from a long dead end job that I probably would have stayed at. It was really easy and really cush, and I didn't plan on going anywhere. And luckily they laid us off, which was a blessing. And I spent a summer rock climbing. That was one of my highlight summers of my life, just being a climbing bum. But I fell in love with stone. I noticed when I was climbing, I found I was really captivated by the stone. Whatever cliff I was climbing, I would just find myself just completely distracted by the patterns, the veins, the geological stuff going on, and then the big boulders everywhere. And ironically, shortly after that, I started working for a friend of a friend just outside of Boulder who was building some properties, and he needed a laborer. So I went there, and he just immediately threw me at a huge pile of boulders and directing me to build retaining walls, which I had never done before. And he didn't know how to do it either. he was not a teacher. He kind of muscled some around and said, "No, just do this, and just hold the wall back," kind of thing. And so that was my introduction to stone. But I very quickly fell in love with it. I had that I've been here before feeling. And of course I didn't have any tools or anything like that, but being in the mountains, surrounded by stone, and it just felt familiar. And I immediately, within a couple weeks, I had it in my head, this is what I want to do, which was shocking to me. But yeah, that was my introduction anyway.
Yeah. It's similarly, like I found stonework when I moved out here to Colorado after growing up in New Hampshire, and I had a bunch of really dead end jobs. I mean, I couldn't call them dead end because a lot of people were doing them as careers, but no disrespect to them. But I mean, I just hated them. They were just mind numbing kinds of work. And I answered an ad in the paper to build stone walls, and I had no idea what that even meant. It just sounded interesting. So I showed up on the job site, and it was a big landscape crew, and they were doing a lot of retaining walls, a lot of field stone work. And so, yeah, that was the beginning. I really just fell in love with it. And, it's funny because after doing stonework for a few years, I had forgotten that I had really just spent my entire childhood like just loving stone. Sometimes when something's such a part of you, it doesn't always register as your identity almost. And so I just, after a few years of doing stonework, I remember my mom reminded me, she's like, "Oh yeah, when we drove cross country, like you had to stop." This is when I was like 12 or 13, at every single rock shop along the way to look at all the stones. And so, a lot of memories like that, and just remembering as really, really little, like, being in the driveway and sorting through gravel and just being fascinated by it as a little child, probably about 4 or 5 years old. So I think the love of stone was always there. Like, as John said, it just feels familiar. And when I started picking up stones to build walls, it just felt like something had returned, like a part of me had been revealed, a really welcome old friend. And the stone just felt like an old friend too. Yeah, and it was interesting because I remember at the time I was in my late teens, probably 19 or 20, maybe eight, I think I was about 19. And I was like really stressing out about, I felt like I was taking forever to find my path in life, which was actually pretty early. You know, I know people in their 30s and 40s who are still looking for what is their passion. But yeah, when I found that, I knew it was what I wanted to do with the rest of my life.
And so have you both always been in Colorado?
Grew up in Wisconsin, a little town. Well, I was born in the town of Two Rivers, Wisconsin. Only lived there for a few years as a young child, and I spent most of my life in a little town called Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin, which a lot of people know as a real gaudy tourist trap there. Kind of water parks and go-kart tracks and mini golf courses, that kind of thing. So that's where I spent most of my life. And so I moved to Colorado in February of 1995, trying to escape. Definitely escaping your hometown kind of move.
How old were you then?
I was 20. I came here at the age of 20. Yeah.
Zach?
Yeah, I grew up in New Hampshire, and it's always interesting. Like now that I'm on, on Facebook and social media, and I have Facebook friends of people who are doing stonework in New Hampshire, because I didn't do any stonework in New Hampshire. So it's interesting to see what they're doing with all the beautiful granite that's there. But yeah, I moved out of high school. I went to Albuquerque, New Mexico for a year, which was like a totally foreign, alien landscape compared to all the woods, the trees of New Hampshire and the dark gray winters. And then after a year of being in New Mexico, I moved up to Colorado in 1996. In May of 96, I moved up.
So sort of very
now.
sort of similar timescales then for you
Mm-hmm.
both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was it that attracted you to Colorado?
I visited. I came out with a couple friends the summer before. It was the summer of '94. I visited Boulder, and without ripping on my hometown too much, it was a pretty toxic place to grow up. There wasn't a whole lot to do, and so when I visited Boulder and saw the beauty of the mountains, I remember standing on Pearl Street here in Boulder and seeing the foothills and the Flatirons and just the free spirit at the time. And it was pretty clear, like, I hadn't visited that many places to think about where to move, but I knew it was better than where I was living. And so that fall I went back home, worked a few more horrible jobs, and saved up enough money to come out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, I had gone on a cross-country trip with my parents from coast to coast when I was in middle school, so around like 11, 12 years old. And we drove through Colorado, and I just fell in love with the mountains. And the mountains here have such a draw, such a power to them. And I felt like that it just lived in me ever since that trip out west. And I just wanted to go be around the mountains. And under the pretense of going to school in Boulder, I think is kind of going to college out here is kind of what brought me out. But it was really the draw of just wanting to be in the mountains.
That's quite an amazing thing to kind of seep into you at such a young age, that you wanted to go and be beside the mountains. It's quite powerful.
Yeah, I think as a kid, you don't really understand what drives you necessarily, but you have these feelings, and sometimes they make sense 10 or 20 years down the road of what kind of guides you. But it's always interesting to reflect on that, I think.
So sorry.
I was going to say there's an interesting story that around Boulder related to all the people that flock here. And I don't know if you heard it when you came through, but it's called Chief Nywot's Curse. And the story goes that when the Native Americans were sort of being driven out of the area, there was a curse put on the place that said there's a stone feature called the Devil's Thumb that comes out the top of the Flatirons right outside of Boulder. It literally looks like a big old thumb, and the story is if you come and you look at the Devil's Thumb, you are stuck. You will come back. You have no choice. And it's ironically, there's a lot of people that's really how it is. They come and they visit, and that's it. Like they have to come back.
They're hit with the curse.
Yeah, with Chief Nywot's curse is what it's called. Anyway. Yeah.
And so neither of you went on to college or university then? It sounds like.
Well, Zach
did.
Zach did. I did not.
Yeah,
So
I studied. I majored in environmental studies, which is more of a policy-based degree as opposed to a science background. And I don't know. I went to school and I quit a couple times. I took a year off. I wasn't really into it. I just sort of felt like I was most of the way through, and it probably would be a good idea to just complete university. But I didn't have a real. I was doing stonework the entire time I was in school, putting myself through school. So yeah, I don't know why I did that. I'm still kind of trying to figure out why I spent that time. But anyway, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I did not attend any college. That was not part of my life plan. I don't think at any point. I was not very academically inclined. No. High school, I barely made it through school. Not that I was dumb so much, but some of us just learn in different ways. And
so were you sporty then?
I was somewhat of an athlete. I played hockey and ran cross country, and I definitely like physical activity. But when I moved here, it wasn't even for that. Like a lot of people do come to this region to mountain bike, kayak, climbing. But I unfortunately, I really was escaping. I was escaping somewhat of a toxic place.
I'll need to look it up.
I knew I'd have a healthier lifestyle here, and mentally, emotionally, physically, it was just a better place for me.
And you sort of just bummed about a few sort of dead end jobs then. What sort of type of jobs were you doing?
In Wisconsin.
Or when you come back?
When I came to Colorado, I had some real bad ones, like cleaning rooms at a hotel. And it's just a couple little things, but then I found kind of a real nice dead-end job working for an audiobook company that distributed audiobooks. And I have to say, as mundane as the work was, they really promoted listening to audiobooks. So everybody in the warehouse always had headphones on, and they always had a Walkman. So I learned a lot. I mean, I wasn't going to school, but I had this huge library of audiobooks, and I would listen to everything from, Joseph Campbell and like all kind of nonfiction, somewhat spiritual stuff, historical things. So I did learn quite a bit, even though I wasn't going to school.
That's a great resource to have
I really,
at your ears, as they say.
Yeah, and I credit a lot, that definitely molded me a bit, listening to, a lot of spiritual, I called it the gray stripe, because the gray stripe on the books was nonfiction. And
right.
So I was focused on, just trying to educate myself, even if I wasn't, going to school. So.
And how long did you work there then?
That was almost 6 years.
Wow, that's a lot of books you can listen to in 6 years.
Yeah. And like I said, the work was very mundane, but a lot of good people. It was one of those companies where there was a great company to work for. It was just fun people, and like I said, almost everyone there would have just stayed if the company didn't pick up and leave. So, yeah.
And so you've kind of briefly talked about your move into stonework, both of you. Maybe you could just kind of outline a little bit more of that kind of initial journey into the material. What drew you there? What opportunities arose for you that started you on the trade and the craft?
You want me to go, Zach?
Sure.
Okay. So after about a year or two of working, I was working for what I say is this old hippie guy, and he was a really great guy to work for. He really gave me this freedom, and he also he pushed me in this. When I told him I loved the stonework, he pushed me. He was like, "Oh, you should really pursue this. This is a really great trade." And so after falling in love with it, I right off the bat, when I really knew I wanted to do it, I found the stone foundation pretty early. I immediately, once I knew this love, I was online and I'm like, okay, where are the teachers? Where are the people? How do I really find this, a real authentic teacher? And at that point, I called Tomas. My first symposium was the one in Ohio. It was right on the border of Ohio. I think it was 2003 or 3 or 4. And just for some inspiration, and I didn't know anything at the time, but I did meet a lot of people there. Came back from that. Then I put this in, I put a flyer up all over Boulder saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And, explaining my situation, I just discovered stonework. I'm looking for an authentic, a dry stone teacher specifically, because I knew that much already. Like that was something I connected with. And I continued to work for this fella in the mountains until I got a call from, I got a few calls back, but a lot of people they didn't want to take me on. They'd call me back, they'd see the flyer, they call the number, and they just want to talk to me because I guess it was interesting to them, this flyer put everywhere. And so no one really would take me on. A guy named Dave Hine called. He called once, said he couldn't help me, but then he called me back about a month later, and he's like, well, I'm not a master, but it sounds like you have a passion for this. And so I jumped on with him, and that was a good 2 or 3 years of doing like residential veneer work, just trying to, just somehow move into it. That was like what I'd say is phase 2 of my stone journey.
Zach?
So I mean, with when I joined this landscaping crew, it was really evident, like as I said before, just how powerful the stone was, and like meeting an old friend. And I worked for them for a couple of years, and the woman running it, Kimmer Makaris, I ended up becoming in a relationship with her and ended up getting married, and then we got divorced many years ago. But I learned a lot from her initially and on that landscape crew. And after a couple of years, I went on my own and was doing a lot of really small projects, a lot of patios. And for some, a lot of times when you start doing a certain kind of work, you just get pigeonholed. And so I get patio jobs and people want me to do more patios, and it was a bit frustrating, but I did love doing them back then. I think we're both a little burned out on doing patios now, but I did that for a long time. And then after about 9-10 years, John and I met in 2010, I think, on a job. It was a really big job, and John had come to work for us, and we really just kind of hit it off really quickly. and John started talking about the stone foundation. I mean, we both love to talk about stone and the deeper kind of relationship we have with it. But the stone foundation at that point was one of the few games in town with Tomas Lips, at the helm, the legendary Tomas. If anybody's ever met him, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I mean, I went to a symposium in Ventura, California, that Tomas put on in 2010 with this Japanese walling workshop with the Awata clan, Suminori and Junji. And so that was a real eye-opener, because I remember going to that, and I thought I was like pretty good at stonework, and then I went there and there were so many people from all over the world, and it was so humbling, because I thought I was pretty good, and then it was like just like kind of take me out at the knees. I mean, not that it was I realized how bad I was. It was just, it made me humble, and how much I needed to learn. That was kind of a big intro. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so there wasn't a large kind of tradition of dry stone walling then in and around Colorado and Boulder then? There wasn't that many people doing that? Even though what you said earlier, there's the sandstone quarries, it sounds like you've got the material right there at your fingertips, which tends to facilitate lots of, sort of tradesmen in an area.
Well, I mean, the stone trade, I mean, so for Colorado in the Front Range, as a lot of the settlers came out in the 1870s, like with the army, and that's when a lot of the Native Americans were driven out, and all of that horrible genocide happened. But I mean, there was, they've been quarrying sandstone in the Boulder Lyons area since like I think 1870s, 1880s. It goes back pretty far, but I mean, without getting into such a bigger discussion about the building trades, I mean, the stone trade was thriving, and I think there was quite a tradition. There's a lot of beautiful buildings up from like 1880 up till 1910 or 20 around here that are beautiful stone buildings, but there's that gap in the trades where I think with the advent of steel and two by six, timber construction, the stone trades dropped off. And so there's a big gap. There's not a lot of people around here who are more than second generation in the stone world. There is a granite quarry up here that I think they're fourth generation. It's a very small, independent, local, family run business, but it's pretty rare to see that up here.
So you were saying the sandstone quarries. So those are kind of sitting idle now. Then they're not working quarries as such.
Oh, they're working. They produce a lot of stone, a lot of veneer stone, a lot of 4-inch depth veneer stone, a lot of flagstone.
So they're doing a lot of processing then.
Yeah, but I mean also bigger blocks. I mean the quarries are thriving. It's just producing different kinds of materials. But the quarries in Lyons, I mean, they ship all over the country.
Right.
I see this Lyons red sandstone all over the West when I travel. It's kind of amazing.
So it sounded like you kind of stumbled upon one another on another job, and you immediately kind of formed a bond. Where did your relationship go from there? How did that develop?
Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to backtrack just a little bit.
No, that's perfect. Yeah.
There's an interesting little happenstance where this I won't name him. We'll call him Mike. This guy, Mike, that I worked for in the mountains. When I was still working with him or for him, he just happened to be in Boulder or somewhere around Boulder, and ran into Kimmer, Zach's partner at the time. So he and she must have been doing stonework or working on some project, and he spoke to her, and Zach and I both agree that he was probably hitting on her. But he met her doing stonework and said, "Oh, I know you gotta meet this guy that's working for me, right? I know this really great mason," which is kind of ridiculous considering I'd only been doing it like a couple of years. And so this guy, Mike, who stumbles into Kimmer, tells Kimmer that, oh yeah, you got to meet this great Mason. And well, of course she's like, well, I'm with a Mason, you know? And so that was kind of that kind of connected us. And there was a few little emails back and forth. I think it took probably like 3 or 4 months before we finally had dinner together. And I think actually that was I think it was like the fall or winter of 2009. That's when we finally met, and we hit it off like right away. There was all sorts of strange similarities, which I won't go into, but many coincidences, and so yeah, that was how we met. And like Zach said, then we finally started actually working together in 2010.
So what was those initial Stone conversations like? You know, what made you think that this is somebody I could, you know, is a Stone brother?
For me, it was, you know, we both shared a passion for it. You know, I came in that first meeting with him where we had dinner. I was kind of fresh off the Barrie, Vermont Symposium. Were you there, David?
No.
Because that was pretty epic for me. That was when I took my level 1 test and did a workshop with JSR, a dry stone workshop. And so I came back from that like hyper enthused. You know, I'm like, oh, Zach, it's like, you just gotta go. You just gotta go. It's like, it's anybody and everybody. It's just a bunch of geeks, a bunch of stone geeks. And so that kind of just sparked it. And, you know, our conversations really revolved just around the passion for stone. You know,
did that make you want to go to a symposium, Zach?
Oh yeah, that lit a fire under me. Absolutely. And I think what I remember from our conversations was it's just that palpable sense of there's somebody who sees what I see in the stone, which is something that is deeper than what I've read about, or if you talk to someone who just does big production work, they may not have the same feeling, the same passion. They may too, but I mean, you know, that was what I remember the most. And John felt like a brother, just from our first meetings. You know, that sometimes there's that indescribable quality that when you meet somebody, there's a connection that goes way beyond what's happening in the moment. And I know I felt that with him early on.
So you've been working together for the last 10 years then?
Yep.
So going back to my introduction, so have you felt like taking the hammer and chisel to one another?
I can honestly say, yeah, hopefully I don't choke up too much, but I can honestly say no. Like it's been nothing but like compassion for each other in our approach. I mean, I think the worst thing that might happen would be just trying to come to a decision, maybe in a moment of indecision. Like, it's like, all right, let's just decide. You know, and I'm guilty of sort of kind of weighing the options a little too much. But no, I've never felt any of that.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, I think it's kind of amazing and it's kind of special in what we have, because there's definitely been moments of frustration. But I mean, you know, we've been on jobs where we've traveled and we're away from home for a week or two at a time. And I mean, we're around each other like 23 hours a day, basically. And we still get along really well. I mean, it's kind of amazing.
I mean, that definitely sounds very special, because, as you know, stone people have a slight reputation for being grumpy. So for you to have such a good special relationship for so long sounds, you know, definitely kind of almost unique.
Yeah, well, not just grumpy, but I mean, so many of the best stonemasons that I know are really stubborn and really bullheaded, and we're independent, because I think it's part of the nature of the craft too, where you're creating something, and sometimes you don't, you know, the worst things are designed by committee. So I think I think it is a special thing that John and I aren't butting heads all the time.
Yeah, I think there's something in that. You it's very difficult to learn, from say a workshop or something. You ultimately have to go away, spend time in front of the rock pile by yourself, and you develop your own methodologies and your own working practices. So therefore, and you get it to where it really works for you. So yes, it's difficult then when you work alongside somebody else, because they're working in their own methods. So yeah, I guess that's where a little bit of tension comes in sometimes.
Yeah, just a little quick story, but I remember when you came out, David, to Kansas for our 2017 symposium, and I remember when you and Sean Adcock got on the wall together, and I just watched you two, and I don't know if you had met Sean before. Have
No,
you?
I had never met Sean, only
But
by
you
reputation.
By reputation, yeah. But I just remember watching you two. There was just a really lovely connection, and you just both got down and just started walling, and it was just a lovely thing to witness, And so
It's one of the best afternoons of my life. Just because obviously, I come from an arts background. I've totally picked up the stone trade, just kind of ad hoc as on the job, and in some ways, Sean has always kind of been the kind of little grumpy stonemason on my shoulder, because obviously I've read his books and all the rules, and so I was a bit intimidated to be meeting him. So, but I really wanted to spend some time on the wall with him. So, no, it was a great afternoon, and yeah, I mean, he's just such a great guy, lovely kind of guy. So, no, I really enjoyed that. It's interesting that you remember that.
Well, it's just that there's a magic when you meet people who love and understand the material and the trade, and when we all meet up in whatever context that is, there's something really beautiful that happens. It's this is what the term stone tribe comes from. It's just that feeling, that bond.
Yeah, I mean, again, that was the first time I'd obviously looked from afar through my computer screen at the symposiums over a few years, and yeah, I was really wanting to come and join you, the Stone Tribe. It looked like great fun. So I think I kind of outlined a little bit that your approach, the way that you're working now, is kind of unique within the kind of stone world. So maybe kind of sketch out for me a bit of kind of how that has developed over your kind of relationship over the last 10 years. How have you kind of arrived where you are at now?
Okay, I'll start with this one. This is a big question because it kind of draws together so many different areas of how I relate to the world, how I relate to myself, and how I relate to stone and stonework. I think that I've always been a really strong believer that there is so much more to life than what is seen. It's like the kind of, when you meet somebody, how much of our communication is nonverbal? There's a lot going on under the surface. And so I think when I first started working with stone, it was so clear that this is an intelligent material. And so it's kind of hard to find words for this, or like a living material. And so it has a certain aliveness, it has a certain sort of a resonance to it that for me, it feels like working with family. And it feels like working with an old friend. And if I think about what stone is, the way I see it, it's like the library of the earth. It has been, in geological sense, it has been around, for hundreds of millions of years, and it has witnessed, humans, coming and going, the dinosaurs coming and going. And the way I see it is that it holds all of that energy in it somehow. And obviously, if you look at a sedimentary rock, it's like on a, if you've ever seen like a huge tree that they've cut down, I've seen these in the Pacific Northwest, where there'd be a huge tree that's got a 10-foot diameter trunk, and then there's all the tree rings, and then there's a little tab like, oh, this is when the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776 or whatever. And so like stone has that times 1,000. And so there's just something that I feel that like stone wakes up in me, like a memory of sort of our ancient origins of wherever we come from as humans. And for me, most importantly, it's a sense of being in connection with the earth. I mean, John and I both feel, and it's a pretty common belief, that the earth is a living being. And it's not just trees and rocks and a bunch of magma inside, but there's an energy, a consciousness to it. And that a stone that's part of the earth's body. It's part of her body. And so for me, there's like it's like a sacrament almost working with stone. There's a sacred quality that, and I don't always feel this, so you don't want to talk like I'm on this cloud all day in meditation. Sometimes I just go to work and I'm pissed off and not in a good mood. But the idea is to really evoke that relationship, that we're working with something that is so beautiful and has taken millions of years to form. And when I hold a stone in my hand, it's like there's a sort of awakening that happens just by having the awareness that I'm working with a piece of the earth, and it's special and it's precious and it's not just a bunch of fucking rocks.
I think that really resonates with me, especially after hearing John's talk at the symposium in Kansas. He kind of really opened my eyes up to thinking about the material like that. And there is definitely some sort of something that you can't quite put your fingers on. There's a connection to that gets right into your soul when you're working with rock. Was that a kind of philosophy that's come through the relationship with the material, or did you have kind of more spiritual kind of feelings within yourself before you actually started working with the stone?
You want to do this one, John?
I definitely, and I don't want to speak for Zach, but I know him pretty well. We both, I think, have from a young age have been what you might call seekers, if you will. Just like he said, always looking for that, looking for what's under the surface. I've always been somewhat of a philosophical, thoughtful. At a younger age, I wouldn't have called it spiritual, but I mean, it's an adequate word. So I think it's been with me, it's, at least in starting in my teenage years. And, there's been events through my life that have sort of, that have revealed the unseen. I've had what you might call mystical experiences. I've had experiences that just opened doors to different, like the veil just disappeared at certain points in my life. And so long before I found stone, that was there. So when I found stone, it was just perfect to me. It was this perfect medium, and everything Zach said about the ancient information within it, and the authenticity of it, which is something I really love. The trueness of stone, where we as humans, it's so easy to not be real. It's so easy to cover things up, and it's like stone is just it's as true as something can be. And so yes, it's been with me most of my life, that approach.
What would you acquaint the relationship that the human person would have with stone? Where do you think that ultimately comes from?
Well, you want to? I'll just say real quick here. Like, I mean, we're made of stone. I mean, not literally. I mean, actually, literally, we are because of the elements. But I mean, I feel like we come from the earth. I mean, we come from our mother, obviously. But I mean, everything that we feed ourselves and nourish ourselves with, it's grown from the earth. It's grown from minerals that break down into soil that the plants, use with photosynthesis, et cetera, water. But I mean, I feel like it's in our blood, like literally, it's in our bodies. And so there's an undeniable connection that exists, whether we want to tap into it or not. It's just, it's part of us.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I see stone as an ancestor. Like, I mean, I really, in a very real way, when I see a crystal, when I see a crystal band, and I'm like, oh, that's like my great grandfather times a billion. Like, I mean, I really do feel that with stone. You know, it's
What do you think, David? Oh, sorry.
No,
Go
I
ahead.
think you know, the experiences that you're talking about definitely kind of relate to my own kind of feeling and the sort of awakening of what I feel when I work the stone. I think when you're standing there in a rock pile and it just looks like a pile of rocks, but it's when you're working it and you've got lots of time to think when you're standing at the wall, and you realize, you know, that this is this you're touching something so elemental that goes back so far, and you know, like, we've got a connection to nature, but this is on a totally different level. You know, think about the largest tree, the oldest tree. I don't know, maybe it's about 1,000 years old, 1,500 years or whatever. But stone's on a totally different level. I mean, it's like, you know, when you're picking up a piece of Scottish sandstone, this was formed and created when Scotland was over the equator. You know, it's just this totally different kind of level of time, and it kind of connects you to all those kind of things and feelings. And it's I do think there is something within the material that connects into something very deep within us. And I think you guys are probably closer to understanding that than I do. One of the things I had been thinking about recently was that there's one of the important books that I read earlier on in my career was a book called The Invisible Pyramid by Lauren Isley. I don't know if you've read it or even heard of it, but it's it was written in the 70s. It was written at the point where the space race was on, and man was going out to the moon. And it's a kind of humanistic look at where we were standing at the world at the time. Sort of, it was the first opportunity that we ever had to break out of our own world. And so it's a really interesting book. It's quite an important book for my own kind of development. And but he speaks about consciousness coming into to humans when we first started to peer out from the forest. And this was when, you know, as it was kind of, you know, coming out of the darkness as such. But I wonder whether the connection for stone, the deep connection, goes further back than that. You know, to where we were cave dwellers, to where our ancestors were quite. You know, it's almost like being in the womb of the earth, and that was where we were safe and comfortable. And I don't know if you've ever been to any caves, ancient cave paintings. Have you ever been? So
No.
we always went on a holiday, summer holidays, to France, and we were staying at a place south of Paris, and we visited these ancient caves. And you go down and underneath the mountains, it's caves that are all you know, formed from the river flushing out the limestone. It's just these amazing cavernous spaces. But you go in there and it's all dark, and then at some point you get to the ends of the cave, and they turn on a flashlight, and all you see just above you is all these cave paintings. And it's just the most amazing kind of experience. And it just speaks of community and fun and, you know, just comfort in that space. And I just wonder whether that's some sort of connection to, to that inner emotion that we feel.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, I've never really been in a cave like that. I've seen petroglyphs and on cliff walls in New Mexico, and but there is something. I mean, I don't have that experience to relate to, but that does. I'm sure there's a lot of origins like that where stone represented safety, like you said, and protection. But I think there's something permanent. I mean, course, nothing is ever really permanent, but there's something that's seemingly permanent about stone, and that, how do I say this? It it inspires me, at least, to think of what is, quote unquote permanent in myself, or what is that part of me that is unchanging. And that's, we're getting into some pretty esoteric stuff, but I feel like there's an echo of that too.
And you're
I,
now kind of taking this philosophy into your stonework with your sacred spaces.
You go ahead, John.
well, I wanted to go back a little bit and just add that, with the connection with stone, you were asking like how far back it goes. I think it's one of those connections that you can't really undo. It's innate. I think there's something that you just can't deny if you open your eyes to it. So I just wanted to add that to the connection question. But
I think it's a really important part of the stone story for the stone tribe. It's something we should be kind of shouting out and promoting a lot more about what humans and societies can get from the material. I mean, I think some of the sort of disassociation we're all feeling within communities can be directly related to some of the sort of manufactured products that that we're surrounded by and we all have to live with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's funny because, like, it seems that wherever I go, when the subject of stone comes up, like, most of the people respond with this, "Oh, I love stone." And I don't know how many clients we go to, we're working at their house, and they have a little pile of stones that they've collected from all around the world or the country or the state, wherever their travels are. There's so many people who gravitate towards it. And so I think as we talk about building with stone and the structures that surround ourselves with, that we have around the world that are made of stone, I mean, there's the obvious thing that you've alluded to, David, in the past, and it's just that, well, what's left of our ancient world? Stone structures. I mean, we have, mummies from Egypt, and there's other artifacts and things like that, like old Viking boats that people dig up. But the stone is what remains, and the stone is what it's like the artifacts of all of these civilizations that still speak to us in a way where, I mean, when you walk into a stone building, or when you're walking around stone ruins, there is something about the quality of the material that, I mean, for me, like, I feel held in a way. I feel like protected, like you were talking about with the caves. And it's like I can feel the level of craftsmanship on some, sort of abstract way, that it's just harder. I don't get that sense as much when I'm in a wooden church. I mean, although that's a kind of, it's hard to talk about this stuff because it's really about our personal experience,
Mm-hmm.
And there's just something about the stone that it's like it holds that energy, of all the thousands of people that have walked across the floor, people who have prayed in a temple. Go ahead, David.
No, I was just going to say, I think you've alluded to something really important there, is that when you move into any of these old stone structures, you almost feel the hands of those people, the masons, the people that made it. You don't get that with a modern building. You don't feel that same kind of kinship, that connection to the past.
I think that falls back to the intent, the intent of the builders at the time. There was, of course, I might have been alive then, but not in this body. I think that really falls back on the purpose and intent that's there when something's being built. I mean, we all know, you can have two structures that look identical, and you have one that's built from a passionate builder who just loves what they're doing, and another that is just kind of they didn't really care. And you can feel those things. I think you can really feel those things. It's not just design, I mean, design is huge, but the intent and the consciousness of the builder is very relevant to all that.
Yeah, and I find it too that like, the trend that this world is going in, I feel like we're at this really important point where everything is becoming like the building materials, everything is becoming more veneer-like. I mean, how many custom cabinets have like a 32nd of an inch thick of a wood veneer over some, conglomerate of like wood pulp and chemicals underneath that builds the structure of the cabinet. And this thin veneer stone, which is an inch thick, and I've seen it even thinner in tile, and all of these things, like, they're, I think, reflective of the way that sort of we're going as a society, which is, what is presented is more important than the substance of it. This is like all these people on Instagram and social media who they spend hours, working on these shots, and then they go back to their depressing life afterward. And so it's like, I think that people are getting tired of that. People are hungering for some depth and some presence, and like you can replicate the look of a big stone or a stone veneer, and to the untrained eye, I mean, as stonemasons, we can see that fake stuff a mile away. We can recognize it, or even thin veneer stone. Sometimes it's pretty obvious, but I don't think you can fool the body. You can't fool the heart in that way. And so, like, when you're standing next to a really massive stone, or you're in a stone building, there's something in your body that it wakes up something very deep and it resonates. And with a veneer, it just doesn't do that. I mean, I don't know what the science is behind this, or physiology, or whatever it is. I mean, I'm just going on my own personal experience, but there's just something that you cannot replace with a big stone or a solid stone structure.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the secret that we hold, that the stone tribe hold, and somehow we need to get that out into a wider world. So many people would just benefit even from the us making more of the trade and being out there, and we've got a great message to sell, I think.
Going back to what you were saying, this approach, or this angle on doing stonework. You were saying it needs to be shouted out and it needs to be expressed more. I would say that one reason it isn't is because it crosses over into the personal, right? Like the authenticity of the work, really going into the depth of the stone. That also means you're gonna have to go into the depth of your own psyche, right? It comes back to the person, and that's hard, right? That's hard for anyone to really see truth, like within themselves or in something you build. So I think that is a part of it. Like we all, you mentioned, I read in what you wrote about the talk I gave in Kansas, how I was kind of bearing my heart there. I kind of threw my heart on the table. That made you uncomfortable, right?
Yes.
And so that does. And in the same way as I think that's one reason it's not as prominent of a discussion, because it doesn't just address the real authentic, the structure or work, because it's going to come back to you too. And something's going to have to wait. Something's going to have to fall away. There's going to have to be more revealed on a personal level. And I think, that's just my 2 cents on why that might not be.
And do you have a kind of any kind of roadmap towards getting that message further out?
The map. I love the map.
I must admit, I have this kind of a hatred of modernism, a hatred of modern architecture, and I kind of almost hope it's a blip within the kind of human society, that at some point somebody will wake up and go, "That's all rubbish," that stone can provide so much more, and we need to go back to that. There was I think society benefits from being kind of ripped up and reinvented. But I think we're at a point now where we could actually rip modernism up and go back to some of the things that society's held dear for so many thousands of years.
This idea about the map, I think, is great, and it's funny too, because I was talking to a good friend of mine, this very wise person, and I was talking to her about this very subject, about wanting to bring more sacred space into the world and how we relate. And I was asking her about a map, and she took a blank piece of paper and she put a dot in the center and she showed it to me and she said, "Here's your map." She's like, "You are the map." And so it's like, what's important here is our relationship to the material and how we feel in the space, I think, is what's really important. And the only way that you can talk about that is to spend time building beautiful spaces and spend time with the material, and then try to be more eloquent and be descriptive in this is how a space can make you feel. And of course, as a society, and we're not always geared to sort of make choices that way, because I mean, it's you don't want to ignore your mind or your logical process, but it's like everybody feels it when they walk into an old cathedral versus some old rundown, versus like a new office building. I mean, people feel that, and you can't argue with that. But it's like the more you develop a relationship with building spaces and are able to just talk about that, I think that's what the value is, and that's the map. It's like the more you're willing to open up about these parts that we don't really talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for John and I, it was kind of a big leap when we've been doing like this residential stonework, for 15 years or whatever. And we started talking about, well, how are we going to talk about the deeper aspects of this without sounding like a bunch of, new age woo types? There was a little bit of trepidation there. Like, how are we going to do about this? And when we started talking about some of the deeper aspects of not only doing the work and relating to it, but building sacred space, building sacred structure, it opened up so many amazing conversations like this one we're having right here.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is about our relationship opening up to the material and be willing to be seen, be willing to be a little more vulnerable. And if people don't agree with it, like, that's fine. That's not our problem. Does that answer your point a little bit?
No, I mean, it's definitely kind of going along the right lines. I think, I think this is a really important conversation, and I hope we get sort of feedback on it, because I think it's a really sort of fundamental kind of, feather in the cap for the stone trade. And I think somehow that message needs to be kind of, shouted out like, far and wide. I mean, one of the things that kind of really slightly depressed me when a little experience that I had was that I tend to use one stone yard. I've been using them for 30 years, and I pop in there every now and again, for whatever project, and I'm always talking away to the guys or to the owner. And they were saying that they actually had some architecture students had come around just for sort of day trip, and they'd never seen a stone yard. They didn't even know what the material was. I mean, to me, I bet they've been to a to a steel yard, or to a block yard, or a processed wood. They understand those materials. We need to kind of get to the next generation of architecture students, and somehow put stone forward as some sort of option, and again, why it's an important material, and get them just to even kind of consider it. I think that's important.
Going back to the approach of spreading this message, I think one important part is utilizing the intelligence of the heart and the mind, not just the mind, because the brain gets a lot of credit. The brain just kind of overrides everything often, and it's such a powerful thing. And I think what Zach and I often are talking about is really that balance. Like, there's an intelligence within the heart, without romanticizing it or anything like that. That's a very real thing. There's an intelligence there, and it's a balance, because we can think our way so far. I mean, it can take us so far. It's done amazing things, and for me personally, that's been a large part of the journey, is opening your heart to the stone. And I know that sounds romantic, but it's really more of it's really tough to describe, but it's very real.
Mm-hmm. I would totally agree. There's a conversation that goes on between you and the material.
Yes, yeah. And so, yeah, just finding that balance between heart and mind, I think is a big part of it. And that requires, again, like I said, opening the heart, which is not easy for a lot of people, so.
And so it sounds like you feel that you have something to say. What's your ambition or plan to put that out in the world? Is it just through your work, through the sort of spaces that you hope to build? Or do you have sort of a long-term strategy plan that, create a series of sort of almost like exemplar projects that you could then show the potential for the material? Or am I being too ambitious?
Well, I will say, yes. I don't know if I would say that I want to get on the soapbox, if you will, and push this idea on anyone. I'd like to think of it more as sharing, just sharing. And if it wants to be received, it can be. In no way do I want to push this idea. I feel like it's more of just a sharing, presenting this approach, this deeper approach to the work, with a deeper connection to the material and the land you build on.
I mean, you really are actually achieving that already, aren't you? Through your stone love sort of daily posts on social media and your website, because that's an important part of your process.
Yeah, I mean, that gets into a little different subject, but I think that, as John said, that I don't necessarily see us going out to like seeking out architectural schools and speaking to people and really talking about the value of stone. I think if that's something that they want to open up to, I feel like that, we're probably open to that too. But I think really our message is in the structures and in the building. And I mean, there's a reason why we chose this name Rising Star, which is really not the old name of the business was Z Stone. And so, Rising Star is really about the spark of light that we all have within ourselves, and trying to live a life where we do our best to embody that, the highest and best of who we are. And of course that's hard sometimes, and we do our best with that. But it refers to that. It refers to the earth as a living being, and it refers to the stone as a representation of that. And so it's not just about building structures, it's about building places, building what we call temples, which is kind of a loaded word, and sacred spaces, which is also an older word that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. But our aim and our endeavor is to build spaces that really facilitate the deeper connection you get when you go into a deep meditation, and when you really listen to that quiet voice within you and to hear what it has to say. When you ask yourself the question, like, who am I? Who am I beyond this idea, like, I'm Zach Johnson, I'm a stonemason, I live in Lyons, I'm a, whatever it is, I'm a husband, I'm a whatever. So it's like, what is underneath all that? And so I think our aim is to build places that promote that deep listening and really encourage that. And I think that that's what a lot of the older temples that we go and visit, that was the purpose of them. It's like an evolution, but really an awakening to our true nature. And I mean, that's not something that I can say that our true nature is this. It's something that everybody can answer for themselves, and we're going to have a different answer for as many people as there are on the planet. So I mean, yeah, I think the idea of like promoting stone is exhausting to me. I don't like the idea of like going around the world like talking about the value of it. I don't know. I think John and I are more like, let's build the places that wake people up. And when they walk into them, they're like, holy shit, that feels amazing. Like,
Yeah.
how did you guys do this?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to sit in this space that you've created. I mean, watching it from afar, it just looks like, you've had the greatest fun creating that. You
This is
going to explain
the cosmic egg one, you
the
mean?
cosmic egg one? Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that, John? Since I just yacked for 10 minutes.
Yeah, that was for us, that was somewhat of a culmination of years of, like Zach was saying, ever since we met, we were always asking that question: what can we do more? What can we build that isn't just a space? It's not just a wall. It's not just a patio. Like and I think from the very beginning, I was saying temples. It's like I want to build. I think that was my word. I want to make people feel good. That was the key thing, not just building. So, after years of working with Zach and actually taking that approach, we even long before we changed the name to Rising Star, we had very deep. We had ceremony. We had this deeper approach to our work. We had our meditative practice in the morning, but we didn't really blend them. We just did that on our own, and that was our approach to it. We didn't tell people about it. So we made the bold leap just to change the name and really step into that place of speaking about it from that place. And so the cosmic egg was a wonderful culmination of someone saying, yes, like do all these things. Like you're great stonemasons and you're really great people. And you also have this deeper approach with Mother Earth and all that. So like bring it all together. So that it was a beautiful culmination of everything.
So was that client led then, or conversation led?
Conversation led. Zach,
So
you want to
they
talk
were
a little?
looking for something for their property anyway.
Well,
he
was kind of that. He was on the same page. We were introduced to him through a friend of mine who mentioned us. He said, well, I know these Masons who also, I don't know how he described us, but he's like these spiritual Masons. And this client's like, well, that's what I want. I want people that approach it from that angle. And I'll pass it to you, Zach.
We had begun working for this client doing various projects, and he had always wanted like a cave, and he was exploring the idea like a cave to sing in. He loved to like do toning, and that kind of sort of chanting and things like that. And that project got nixed. He had talked to us about it a little bit, but it wasn't something that we were going to necessarily build. And so he called us because he had this opening between these two huge standing stones, these big pieces of granite, and it was in this sunken fire pit area. And he's like, well, I just want to put a wall because we're not doing the cave anymore. And so we just kind of pitched him like, what if we do like a really small version of it? This egg-shaped structure that you could crawl into, and was made of limestone. And when you were sitting in it, you could gaze into the fire, which is about 10 feet away through this little tunnel. And, he just lit up. And so the idea came to us, years and years ago. And we hadn't really found someone to build it. Like a lot of ideas come, when you're working, and if you're quiet and stuff comes in. And so he just lit up. And so we began with this idea of a place where you could go that would be completely stone. You'd kind of crawl into a little tunnel that was about 30 inches tall, and crawl through like a 3 or 4 foot little tunnel into this structure that opened up. And we used an ostrich egg as a template for the shape with a flat floor. And so yeah, I mean, that's kind of where the idea came from. And we developed it in conversation with him. We didn't have any plans. It was very kind of loose. He was a very trusting person, and he really deferred to our vision a lot, which was really wonderful to have a client that respected us enough to kind of give over control of some of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's how,
obviously it's a very, very special project, but to be given that kind of entrust from a client, I mean, it must have been a great process for yourselves. Did you find that very enriching yourselves?
Absolutely. Yeah. It was so rewarding just to be building something with that very specific purpose, that we've, as far as sacred space goes, as far as temple goes, all the years we've talked about it, this was it. I mean, it was small. It's a mini one, but it was like every step of the way, like even the amount of grinding and all that, like it was just enjoyable all the way through, and so rewarding just to see it to take shape slowly.
Did it feel like a culmination of everything that you've been working towards, and almost a confirmation of what you've been working towards?
Absolutely. Yes. And we incorporated, some other aspects, it called upon all our skill sets, which go beyond just hammer and chisel. Yeah.
And to touch a little about like what you were saying about speaking to the world about the value of stone. And I think that, John and like our approach is that, we found a client who we were already on the same page with, and who had all on his own time in previous years, who had traveled the world going to sacred sites and really being fascinated by them. And so our approach is that there are enough people in the world who can support this and who want to learn about this. And there's enough people in the world who are fine with their, with their fake stone on their house and things like that. Like those people can, there's no problem either way. Whatever choice they make, they can have that kind of house. Or if we find someone who we're lucky enough to build with, and who has the money to spend and who resonates with our vision, I feel like these are the people that are hungry for this kind of a thing. I mean, when we first met this guy, he said, "I've been looking for you guys for a long time," because there's not a lot of people, I think, in the world who are trying to combine these two worlds, like John said, combine the spiritual world and who have a knowledge of building and stone.
So do you see it as some sort of prototype then?
There, maybe.
For a big one.
It's definitely it is beautiful, and I would not turn down the opportunity to do another one. We learned a lot. The next one would go a lot quicker, I can tell you that much. Yeah.
But I guess in some way you've proven the concept, and it's just, like you say, trying to find other clients that buy into what you can offer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And getting feedback was great too. All from the client to friends that would come by and that would go inside. There was a lot of great confirmations on the power of what it was. To hear that felt really good. To have people say, to feel, and it was different for everybody, but it was a very real, it was a very real sensation that people would feel, whether it was being held, whether it was just the silence and the stillness that you'd experience when you were inside it. And it was different for everyone, but that was really great to have built something like that, have the effects in place, if you compare it to a medicine, if you will, to like test it, okay, hey, this works. Like this really does, this is not my imagination. This is a very real thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing we're hoping to capture is this. We feel that there's a need in the world and a desire in the world for dedicated spaces I mean, growing up in the States here, I didn't grow up in any religious sort of tradition necessarily. And, like there wasn't, John and I have talked about this a lot, where there's like, we didn't have rites of passage necessarily. There wasn't a lot of tradition that a lot of people from around the world are steeped in. And even you've talked about it in the UK, just the tradition of stonemasonry, stone walling, I mean, stonework in general. Like in the States here, it's just not as strong. And so like we get to kind of invent our own rites of passage, our own traditions, our own ceremonies, or whatever it is that whatever rituals, whatever word you want. And so I think with these idea of creating sacred spaces, we're hoping to just develop the idea of we can have a space where it's dedicated for this one purpose. And ideally this purpose, and the way we see it, is to find yourself, to go into stillness, and to see what bubbles up when you quiet the mind. And so we just think that's really important. We feel that there's a lot of people who have responded positively to that.
And how do you hope to build on that experience? Because I guess it has been such an amazing kind of process to go through and to then achieve. I guess you want to get that, get that going again, that momentum. It makes you hungry for more, I think. When you've had a successful project, you're desperate to get on to the next one.
Yes, that's true.
Not just for financial wise either.
No, I mean, it lit a fire in us because as John's, I mean, so, it's interesting. This kind of goes back to the Stone Love comment you made earlier, but like to the public or to the client, they have a window into this is how it's built and this is what's going on. And then their property is in kind of disarray for a week or a month or two or a year or however long it takes to build a project. But they don't really understand necessarily what goes into building something, building anything, even if it's very simple, and the level of experience and the familiarity of the material and the building techniques. It all comes together. And so I think I'm losing my train of thought here. So with the Stone Love posts, oh yeah, this is what I was gonna say. So like the project with the cosmic egg, I mean, we were doing a little bit of shaping with hammer and chisel, and we were doing some splitting of our big slabs with feather and wedges. But I mean, 90% of that job was like grinding, angle grinders, cup wheels, and just like crazy dust.
Dust.
David's ultimate stone talk. The other dust, the stuff where, and so like the actual, like if this wasn't a really inspired project, I mean, we'd be like hating every minute of it because you're just in that dust, and it's, as you know, as being a sculptor, it gets kind of old. And so when you have an inspirational job that comes across, it's like, it makes all of that grunt work so much better.
Yeah, I mean, it's the rewards. It's knowing what you get to at the end that keeps you firing through that dust. Because there's certain times, the dust, like you say, it just becomes tiresome. It's you just can't escape it, regardless of how much you try to protect yourself. You just know you're soaking it up and it's going through your veins. But it's the rewards, knowing what you can achieve at the end that keeps you going.
Yeah, and like getting back to this idea of Stone Love, I mean, so like John, the idea or the word Stone Love, maybe you can kind of speak to that, John, a little of where that came from.
Well, that was just I too used to be much an avid DJ. I was a big promoter of like reggae music, Jamaican music on vinyl, and there was a sound system, which is a traditional Jamaican sound system group, which is pretty well known, and they were just called Stone Love, that I've been familiar with my whole life. And I think the name actually came up as a potential name for our new company at first. So yeah, I'm like, well, what about Stone Love? And we all loved it. We had a guy working with us at the time and he liked it too. And then Zach kind of ran with it in a different direction.
Yeah, so the idea was, we love the phrase stone love. And the idea came from, we were working on a wall in Boulder, and the stone we were using was just amazing. It was a sandstone. It was a pretty hard sandstone, and it had tons of dendrites. It had the character lines were just incredible, and the colors were amazing. And as we're working with this stuff, the beauty of the stone would just reveal itself when you'd split something open, and there'd be this amazing mineral seepage that would go through the layers, and you'd open it like a book and you'd see this incredible pattern. And normally we just shape it, put it in the wall, or not shape it ideally, and the client would never see that. And so the idea of stone love is like, what if we did a daily post? And we don't do them every day, it's kind of hard to keep up with them sometimes, but that really showcases the beauty and those little moments of kind of just like magic, for lack of a better word, that arise during the day. And so the idea was to try to capture that in a photograph and then write about it a little bit. And I think it really kind of, we talk about what we build so much, the final result of anything that any stone worker, any creator or tradesperson would build. But the process is so much a part of it, and it's so important. So the kind of the heart you bring to it, the knowledge you bring to it, and the dialogue that happens over a wall, or there's so many different aspects. And so the process, we tried to highlight the process with stone love, and just those serendipitous moments that happen that most people as non-builders don't get to see.
I mean, I would even kind of equate that to my own kind of experience. I mean, when you're standing building a stone structure and you'll be there for weeks, but you're there every single minute of the day, and you're the one that has the kind of real intimate relationship with that piece of work. And I think one of the things you do really well in Stone Love is kind of record how things change with the weather and the climate. I think that's really important, because you see that, enjoy that yourself. I love it the way that after a rain shower it starts to dry up and it sort of shows off the stone, but only I kind of really see that, whereas you're kind of sharing that through your Stone Love. I think that's tremendous. How many sort of followers do you have on that?
I don't know, not that many. I think I haven't looked. I don't. I think it's probably between 300 and 400 on Instagram. We're not like, I can't give you 100,000.
I think I've only got 50 or 60, so you're doing well. You're doing well.
Yeah. But I mean, that's not the point so much. It's just, the point is really to highlight the depth of what happens in our experience. And I just think about like, those times when you're on the wall and you're doing well, and maybe you come to the end of the day and you're just trying to get a couple stones in and they keep breaking, or just, you're hitting your hand with a hammer, everything just seems to go to shit, and it's like, sometimes it's better to just like, okay, it's time to go home.
Yeah.
And then the next day you show up and it's like you are in a state of flow, which is just, I mean, it's just miraculous in my opinion, where everything you touch goes in almost effortlessly. Everything the stone feels lighter. You feel like there's a flow inside of your body. And, we all have those, since working with our body is such an important part of this trade, that we all have those moments where things seem to sync up and you're just on like cloud 9 and you just want to ride that wave as long as you can.
There's a real joy and excitement on that, isn't there? I mean, there's certain days and certain, times, hours where it's almost like you're in total harmony with the stone, because people maybe think that you're it's a random pile and you need to kind of look about. But when you get into that flow state, you are so efficient that you pick up a stone and it goes in the right place. And that's hundreds like that. And you stand back and you think, I never did one I never reworked a stone twice, or I never broke a stone, and to do that to a random pile, to be that so kind of in harmony with the material, I just love that part of it.
And so often that's when the mind gets out of the way, right? Like it's when you're not thinking, when in athletes or whatever, they talk about flow or whatever activity you're in. It's often when this is not part of the picture. It's just there's something else happening.
I was speaking in the conversation I had with JSR. We were talking about music, and that was what I was saying. I tend to have earbuds in all day listening to music or a podcast because it kind of switches off part of my brain, and it somehow having that in the background, I'm able to concentrate, or the work goes better. I don't know what it is. It's just it is almost like you're switching off part of your brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that works differently for everybody. I mean, like, there's moments when I need silence, and then there's moments where I really want some music just to kind of get my mind out of the way.
Yeah. And do you want to talk a little bit about your kind of daily process, which I think is definitely kind of unique. There can't be many stonemasons that take your approach to a daily shift.
Well, as often as we can, we start our days with a meditation, which I think it's helpful. Whether you are a meditator or not, to start your process with stillness, right? You don't just run in, you don't hit the ground running, which I get we're guilty of that sometimes, but I think it makes for a safer day. It makes for just a more centered day. It's just usually 10 minutes. We sit for, never really more than that, just unless we feel like it. 10 minutes of stillness. And it's just a reset, to go in and just come back into your body if you weren't there. And so that's a daily ritual. We also, another thing we do differently, I don't know if many people do this, is when the stone does arrive for any job, we have what you might call a greeting ceremony, a welcoming ceremony or ritual for the stone. So when it arrives, we, Zach and I, or sometimes the clients, if the clients want to join in, that's all the better. And we basically just go through the process of acknowledging, honoring, thanking the stone, and recognizing it for the intelligent material that it is, apologizing for any unconscious processes, in the time, but from the time it left the mountain to the time it got to us, it's been completely forgotten, right? Like the life of the stone is, it hasn't necessarily been respected. It's blasted, whether it's blasted out of a mountain or, thrown into trucks. So we apologize and for any kind of, unconscious processes that it took to get to us. State our intent in how we plan on using it. We use water in the process, it's sort of a cleansing. And I don't know, that's anything else that there's.
Well, I think there's a lot of things. I mean, but that's a pretty good synopsis of it. It's really like one thing that we do, which is not a new idea, and none of these are really new ideas, but we ask permission. We ask permission to work with it. And so the way we see it is like, if I want to, the stone is not necessarily ours just because we paid money for it. It comes from the earth. The stone is the earth. It's her body. And so, when we ask permission to work with it. And so, if I wanted to, like, on a job site, ideally, if you and I are working together, David, I don't just go over there and like help myself to your lunch, or your tools. It's like, if I really wanted a bite of your sandwich, I would say, hey, do you mind if I have a bite? Because there's a respect and an acknowledgement there. But we don't do that with natural materials. I mean, most we don't do that. I'm saying we mostly as like a modern society. This is an old idea. This is not like a new idea that we invented, that you ask permission of the earth, you know. So it's like we treat it as if, you know, that it has an opinion, or it has an innate just presence or intelligence, where it's like it's not just ours to take because we paid for it. So we have the permission, and then the same with the acknowledgement, as John said so well. It's like when you acknowledge a person for his or her gift, for their gift, I mean, that naturally brightens a person up. If I would say, hey, David, you're really good, you're an amazing artist, and you're a kind human, and you have a great sense of humor, I mean, that's generally going to brighten somebody up. And so,
Is me up.
so I mean, like, and it's true too. So I mean, you know, you are those things. So I mean, with the stone, it's the same way. It's like we feel that when the stone comes from the mountain, it has a connection to the earth that is just there. And then as it's handled without respect, without acknowledgement, without permission, it's like that energy, that connection to the earth just kind of goes to sleep. It feels like it kind of just yeah, it quiets. And so with our intention with this little ritual, and it's, you know, it's not some fancy thing. We usually have like a toilet brush and a 5-gallon bucket of water that we kind of like anoint the stone with. It's not something with feathers and smoke and all this. But I mean, the idea is to awaken the connection that's already there, and to kind of take away all of the disrespect that's been kind of like blanketed over it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So where do you think that, or where have you kind of learnt that process, or even that kind of philosophy? Where's that coming from?
I don't know if I can point to a certain thing, but I think that, like, you know, if you have a brand new car or a brand new space that you go into, it's like it doesn't feel like it's been lived in. It doesn't feel like it holds your energy. Like a lot of times, if you, even with a new tool or a new hammer, sometimes you have to really use it to get the feel of it. And so I think that it's an idea of like embodying um embodying the material or creating a relationship with it that I notice in my everyday life. I don't, for me, it doesn't come from a tradition necessarily, even though I can look to like Native American traditions and see there's an obvious respect and acknowledgement of the earth as a living being. I mean, but I can't pretend to know about that culture because I haven't studied it that much. I don't come from that either, but I'm sure you have something to say about this too, John.
Yeah, I too do not come from any traditional religion. I won't go into the stories, but I got some funny stories of getting thrown out of church. So, you know, growing up, from a very young age, I have like vivid memories of questioning religion. So none of it really comes from anything like that. There's no. I never really grew up with any of that. I'd like, you know, I've called myself a rogue spiritualist before. Like there is no specific teaching. I like I said, I've read from different cultures and theories and philosophies, but it's been kind of my just creating my own viewpoint on things, and it's a lot of it's just based on personal experience. Like I said earlier, having those experiences of connecting with what with what you call the unseen, having the veil kind of fall away, whether it be through meditation or other processes. I've had magical experiences, and that for me has been a big part of it. Acknowledging, what we're talking about, acknowledging that thing that you can't see, just because, like with the stone, sure, it's not talking, and it's not waving its hands around, but there is, feeling your way into those connections, I think, is an important thing. So yeah, it's just from that real basic understanding that just because I can't see it or talk to it doesn't mean there's not an intelligence or a consciousness there.
I think one of the things that jumps out from what you have both said there is that there is there is an energy within the naturalness of the material that is inherent within it. But if it's abused by mechanical processes, it somehow loses that energy. It almost kills it. And in that, you know, where I don't really respond to stone where it's been kind of cut into slabs and polished. To me, it's lost its kind of its energy. It's almost like a dead material then. It's just not got the same life as that material's just come out of the quarry. It's still got, you know, its texture, its color. You know, when it's processed too far, it's lost the energy, I think, that you're talking about.
You know, I think we don't see it as it's necessarily lost. I said before, it's more like we feel like it's gone to sleep. And with the power of being in relationship and conscious relationship with the material, the beauty of that is that you can bring that aliveness back. And I mean, I think that, like, as we said, we don't come from a tradition. Most of this has been through our own experience of what feels good and what feels right. And this just seems like a good idea, and we've tried it. You know, we did it really quietly first. We've been doing it for years, and now we're kind of feeling more comfortable enough to talk about it. But it's like, you know, through our awareness and the intent of our awareness, that is the magic that brings materials back to life. And then we always equate it to people. It's like, if you have an interaction with someone where you are opening your heart, where you're listening, where you're present, I mean, something beautiful happens with that, with a person, you know. And if the other person doesn't want to engage with you, that's fine. That's just, you know, that's their choice. But that's where the magic in connecting with people is when we're talking about things that are real to us, that matter to us, and we're acknowledging as if the other person has the same right to exist and the right to be heard as we do. And if we just take that idea and shift it to a material, it's really the same thing. And so it's not that like we're special or we're doing anything new. Like, we all do this. We all do this as humans. And then on a more specific level, as tradespeople, as stone workers, as artists, as whatever, like, we have these relationships with our material, whatever they are. And we have an opportunity in every moment to deepen that. And the way it is deepened is to go with what feels real, what feels authentic in the moment. You know, it can be a kind of a slightly unnerving process when you first start talking to the stone, you know, and you look around like, is someone watching me, you know? I mean, for me, it was like, what are people gonna think? But it's like, you know, fuck it. That's okay. You know?
You didn't mention it at the first symposium then. No.
No.
Well, I must admit, I think what you say and your approach to your work definitely resonates with myself, and I love what you've been doing, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you both have too.
Absolutely.
So just kind of finishing up then, what's your kind of forward plans moving on from here?
Well, we definitely are looking forward to more sacred space, temple type projects. We continue, no matter what we're building, we have this deeper approach, if you want to call it that. So that's really our goal, is to really just focus on that, you know, creating these spaces that hold people, that connect people with their land on a deeper level. That's really what we're shooting for, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that John said it pretty well. We're hoping to get more of those projects and really to work with people who want to go deeper with these ideas, and who want to create spaces that open us up to, you know, greater possibilities of what we can be as a human race, even, you know.
And you just hope that will happen organically, or do you have plans to somehow, how are you promoting your business then if you want to call it a business, because I think it's slightly beyond the business.
Well, we put a lot of energy into promoting this cosmic egg. You know, we've made that video, which was that was a big step for us in itself. Just like, okay, we really want to push this, not push it, but we really want to share this idea for those who would like that kind of thing.
There's a place of stillness that we all have within, where the quiet presence of our being meets the universe. It is from this experience that we can bring spirit into our body and create a space for our soul.
At Rising Star, we build stone temples and sacred spaces, places of personal power and transformation. We love working with stone, and we handle it with the understanding that there is an intelligence within it. Stone has the power to facilitate a deeper connection between the earth and ourselves. When we build, we honor this sacred bond.
In this ever-busy world that we live in, finding stillness becomes essential to our well-being. With our temples, we hope to offer a quiet respite from the world, promoting personal transformation and healing.
As our hammers ring upon steel and our drills make dust, we hold the vision of the temple as it comes to life. We stack stone upon stone, all the while calling in the voice of the earth to guide us.
We emphasize the relationship we all have with the land and work to consciously build structures that deepen our connection.
More than ever, we need to have a place where our deepest self can call home.
Whether it be finding the temple within or creating structures which nurture that process, Rising Star is here to bring it forth.
Which was that was a big step for us in itself. Just like, okay, we really want to push this, not push it, but we really want to share this idea for those who would like that kind of thing. So yeah, our new website, which was finished, changing our name to Rising Star was a big step. And yeah, having this really great video made by our good friend Jesse Burrell, have to mention him on that. He really worked with us, and it was just great working with him. So that's been the step so far. The Stone Love, which Zach has been pretty on it about that. Just continuing to share our approach.
Yeah, I think your website is a beautiful website, and I think everybody should check it out. One of the things I loved about it was the music of the chisels, your kind of little your little tune, and I listened to that, and there's definitely something very kind of magical about that sound, because I'm sure you're the same. But if you're walking about or driving about and you hear that sound, you go and investigate it. Mm-hmm. Because it's got a very distinctive sound. And one of the things I loved about listening to that is at some point you hear you, Zach, laughing in the background. And that to me sums up, a day at the chisels. It's fun. There's an enjoyment in there.
Yeah, that recording, that was in January of 2016 in Gualala, California, where we had the Stone Foundation Symposium, where it started in San Francisco and ended up in Gualala in California, and that's where Peter Mullins's Stone Zone is. And we had this beautiful, amazing work site where we were building steps and retaining wall and some art, and doing some art carving workshops. And it was in this beautiful grove of redwood trees, and with a lot of moisture in the air, and it was like it kind of had a canopy over us. And I just remember there was, I don't know, a good between 15 and 20 people all shaping this this volcanic stone. And it was like walking into like an orchestra, it felt like. And I just took my phone and hit the record button, and our friend Annie Burrell, who made our website of Annie B Designs, yeah, she put that on there for us. And
No, it's
I
just lovely.
listened-
It's magical. It's
I
magical.
listened to that recording like probably 1,000 times.
Yeah, well, I'll put it on the website. I'll put it up on the website as well there. Well, hopefully you've enjoyed that, and I do really look forward to seeing what you achieve. So I've probably taken up a bit more of your time than you probably are happy with, but anyway, it's been
that
great
was
talking
great.
to you.
It's
It's
been a
fine.
pleasure. And I wanted to say thank you to you, David, because, you know, like I know that getting this podcast going was not an easy thing for you. You are stepping into territory that was not familiar to you. And I think you're doing an awesome job, and we're really honored to be here. And I just think, you know, as an artist and as a human and as a stonemason or stonewaller, however you want to call yourself, like, you're really an inspiration. And what you're doing with the craft, you know, taking your art background and all the creativity and just amazing skill you have and bringing that together, like some of your projects are just pretty mind-blowing, and they're really inspiring.
Well, I mean,
Thank
I
you.
just really appreciate the podcast is good just even to get to hear that kind of stuff. It was worth doing.
Yeah, everything Zach said, I you know, ditto. I just and you know, I think you might you might not be giving yourself as much credit as you should. You know, I you know, as I peruse through your own works and your own writings, I feel like you do understand. You do understand.
Well,
what
I
we're
really
talking
appreciate
about.
it. But as you saw at the start of the podcast today, I'm pretty incompetent as well.
But
Anyway,
you know, just your understanding of our approach, even, you know,
yeah,
I know you
no.
like to say, well, I really do feel you have a.
No, I think you guys are really on to something really important. So,
Yeah.
all power to you. So we'll just say goodbye.
Okay. Thank you so much.
And hopefully our paths will cross at some point.
Yeah.
Yes.
See you later.
Thanks, David.
Thanks.
Bye.
Right. Don't go now.